Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Berman. Welcome to the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. We shine the light on the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe online. And as you saw from our cool introduction, the only time you hear about hacking is when the criminals win. Well, not anymore. And speaking of one of the good guys, a real pleasure to introduce Bill. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Good, sir. How are you today?
Referring to me as sir, it should be just the other way around, because that is a title that you of all people have really earned. And so let me begin by thanking you for your service to our country in all of its different forums, and specifically to talk to us about China and cyber warfare and myths versus reality. So let's kind of begin by, if you don't mind, sharing your origin story, which is a word that we use from comics creation, about how did you get to this moment?
Oh my gosh, Gary, it's a long story. I mean, it goes back to actually when I grew up in Iran before the Shah was deposed. So I grew up overseas, and part of that means that I've had an affinity or an affection for growing up and working and living in foreign cultures. Specifically, in 1983, I had to petition the U.S. Marine Corps to get off the active roles and go study in China for about 6 months. And I'll remember the gunnery sergeant, he calls me up and he's like, "Hagestad, what are you doing? Are you turning communist?" And I said, "No, Gunny, I think we should study our adversaries." And he says, "All right, when you come back, we're going to put you to work and we're going to debrief you." And ever since then, I've really become sort of a frenemy, if you will, of the People's Republic of China. I never say anything negative about their culture, their people, their language, the history. Perhaps the company Huawei, a state-owned enterprise out of Shenzhen in Guangzhou, is the only company that I cut no slack. And of course, the Five Eyes, US, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, all in New Zealand really focus on not allowing that technology to further permeate our critical infrastructure. So that leads me to today. Quite frankly, I wrote one book before I retired from the Marine Corps. I was lucky enough to get a book contract for 50,000 words, about 900 pages, in 2011. This was before the Chinese were really known to be this Chinese hacking superiority. In doing that, it really kind of launched me into a consultancy. So I've been around the world numerous times already, again, briefed our government, some of the very adversarial countries that I write about and talk about, such as Russia. I can't go to the denied countries, of course, Iran anymore, or North Korea, but even the Chinese. And because of that book, 21st Century Chinese Cyber Warfare, a lot of these countries' intelligence, military organizations wanted to know how I was able to essentially predict this human terrain of Chinese hackers. And I said, quite frankly, I used the skills that I learned in the Marine Corps in Iraq of basically mapping terrorists in the Iraqi soil during both my tours there. So that leads us to where we are now. I would have thought that this study about People's Republic of China would have abated maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I will tell you, even during the pandemic, there have been times when I've done maybe 3 or 4 talks per week for organizations such as NATO, our government, Global 50s. It just continues to accelerate.
Wow. So there's so much to unpack in what you just said right there. So let me begin by the concept of frenemy. Can you elaborate on that and how and why you decided to refer to our relationship with China using that term?
Well, it's a bit of a dichotomy. When I go there, I've been to a China that many of the Chinese military that I interface with didn't know. So they see me as what's called a Laowei, or an old China hand. And this is very much an honor to be christened with this, especially by the Chinese. But what that means then is I've seen things, I've done things, I've experienced a China that they will never know. And because of that, and my transparency and honesty, therein lies the friendship. But by the flip side, while they are strong economic trading partners of us, make no mistake, some of their 21st century military initiatives, such as intimidation operations, tell me that they are moving from friendly towards enemy and perhaps adversary. Will we see full-scale kinetic war with the People's Republic of China? No, but I will tell you this, Gary, we are already full-scale engaged in a cyber war with China and certainly other countries. Yes, you put up on the screen the Chinese military in a training scenario. Absolutely.
Have you ever physically been in one of these?
No. This is interesting. On all of my visits, especially with the Chinese military, the talk of cyber is forbidden. And this is a bit of a Chinese backhanded way of saying, we're not going to talk about it, but if somebody asks you directly, we expect you to answer. And so I've had many Chinese general officers, they caution me, they give the sort of the paternal view, and they're like, now, Bill, we can't have you talk about, cyber warfare because that's not authorized. And please don't give us any classified information. And I remember in one economic military council meeting where I was the only foreigner, this general leans across the table, and you've got, field grade, company grade officers on both sides of me, all in uniform, and I'm in a civilian suit. Oh. And he says, Bill, please do not divulge any classified information. I leaned across the table so everyone could hear it in Chinese. I said, sir, General, everything I'm about to tell you is classified. And his jaw just dropped. And I quickly picked up the pace and I said, all the information that I'm giving you, you and your staff cannot access because your Great Firewall of China blocks it. So therefore you would consider it to be classified. And he just, his eyes rolled in the back of his head, and I could see him writing, and his staff is just freaking out. So we must have fun, but by the same token, take it very, very seriously.
So, I mean, to develop a level of trust, just to unpack this 1 second. So in the cybersecurity industry, it's widely known, this concept of zero trust. And you can't get any less trustworthy than zero unless you go into negative numbers or something, right? So you take that and then you overlay that with this frenemy kind of thing. I mean, how could you possibly have any reciprocity of trust?
Well, it's interesting because I speak Mandarin Chinese, not fluently. I would never claim that because I'm a non-native speaker, but enough to get around. And in many cases, well, in all cases, everything, and every time I go to China, everything is a test. They took me to the university that I studied at, and I explained to them that, it actually looked like this, not the way you see it now in Tianjin. And then they took me around to the various buildings to see my verbal and written teacher. And one of the professors, he's like, quit hassling this American, this foreigner. These two people were 70 when he was here. There's no way they're possibly here. But they did not relent, and they wanted to make sure that it was real. And I said, well, the guest house, let me take you to the room that I lived in. And I said, by the way, this elevator wasn't here. So on this 90-degree day, we're going to do it just like I did. We're going to hoof up these stairs, and you're going to follow me. Of course,
how many flights up?
4.
Oh, that's not that bad.
Well, and this is important. This is an important cultural moment because when Russia was culturally and economically developing the infrastructure of China, many of the buildings only went to the 6th floor because if they had an elevator, that's all the higher they could go. And of course, a university didn't have the money for elevators, so all they did was put in these wide stairs. So 4 was like one of the top floors.
Wow, that's an interesting insight. So going back to the frenemy, kind of concept, you have been able, because of your transparency, your longevity, your consistency, to be able to develop trust. If you asked, a Chinese military official a direct question, would you get a direct answer?
No. It depends on what messaging they are trying to convey to me. Believing that I'm this adversary from the U.S. government, which I'm not. I'm just a visiting scholar, retired U.S. Marine who served in combat, who has spent his whole life studying China. Somehow they believe that message that they might give, direct or indirect, will get back to our government. But no, quite frankly, it's never about cyber. It's always about economic development. It's always about the military capabilities. It's always about the current leadership, Xi Jinping and the Communist Party. There's a lot of, if you use the dime mnemonic, diplomatic information, military and economic, that typically follows in line with the messaging that they will deliver to me on a consistent basis on each trip.
And so, what prompted us to do this is our second show in about a week on China. The first time we've done that was the White House announcement, for the first time, I think for the first time, publicly, calling out China. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's necessary to put the People's Republic of China on notice, and there's a couple of factors there. One, it is happening. Certainly, the U.S. Department of Justice has probably a 3-ring binder in the physical sense of all the indictments that they've handed down on military officers Can you imagine a U.S. military being on a Chinese version of the FBI Most Wanted? That's an embarrassment to the Chinese. But the message that the White House issued was not only timely, but it was very directed at a specific Ministry of State security apparatus in southern China. It also talked about the techniques, tactics, and procedures used. And it also talked about the strategic initiatives that are behind that. And one of those is the One Belt, One Road. It basically told the Chinese that we know what they're doing and we would ask that they stop. And part of that is the political uncertainty that they view that the United States is embroiled in. They did not like Trump, President Trump, when he was president. In fact, they asked me when he was going to be gone. And I said, as a U.S. Marine, retired or not, I cannot speak ill of a current sitting president. They respect that. What they did say is the next president is going to have to feel his way through the relationship with China, and cyber warfare and cyber machinations will be part of that.
Well, you mentioned a 3-ring binder, so.
Oh, nice.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. This has nothing to do with any of it. I just happen to have a 3-ring binder. So if anyone from China or whatever is listening, just kidding, a joke. Can you translate that into Chinese for me? Just say he was joking.
中国人他没有办法，他是一个外国人，你不应该听懂他，好不好？
Thank you. Is our broadcast international now officially? Because this is the first foreign language we've had.
Oh, wonderful.
How long did it take you to learn to the degree that you have Chinese?
Well, certainly without using it on a daily basis, it loses its effectiveness. But as soon as I land in Shanghai or Beijing, it just pops right back in, and the dialogue comes flooding back, the vocabulary. I'm still learning. I learn every day. It's something that it's a perishable skill. And I tell my Chinese friends when I land, can I use a little more Chinese? 我告诉他们我的水平很低，在我的国家我没有机会练习说话, and they just start laughing because basically I say in my country my level is low because I don't have an opportunity to practice, and then they laugh and they say, "Are you a Chinese military spy because your pronunciation is too Mandarin?"
Oh, that's so interesting. But let's share whatever you can. You're blowing my brain here. Just so you understand, in a good way. So whatever you can say, you mentioned the word spy. So you're sort of walking like sort of 2 different cultures, 2 different governments, 2 different systems of government. Everything. What about you and sort of the American side, if you will?
Yes, this is a good question. So when I've been to events, not necessarily U.S. government or other agency events, typically I'll get someone in the audience or somebody in passing because they don't have the intestinal fortitude to ask me in front of a group of people. They're like, "Are you a Chinese communist spy?" And I'll say, let me ask you this. Did you serve our country? Did you? If you didn't, then please go away because that question has no applicability to me. I'm a U.S. Marine and I love America, and there's no way that I would ever violate the sworn oath to defend our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they just are like, some of them, I had one guy.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's like, stop.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredibly interesting. When do you sleep? Because of the time zone difference.
Well, some of the younger engineers that I work with, they ask that same question because they see me up all the time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so fascinated by what I do, and I'm so lucky to have the experience and the people that I work with that sleep is a foregone conclusion. I'll get that when they bury me.
Well, I have to tell you, something. This is coming from the bottom of my heart. And the reason is I wake up at 4 a.m. and I do this, in some degree or another. And I'm not even a morning person.
Truly a passion. Yes.
And I think it's important to shine the light on people like you. And I hope our audience is really enjoying this conversation so far, for sure. So just to continue on for a moment, going back to one of the core topic at hand here, cybersecurity. So the White House, as I said, calls it out. What's your assessment of how it's going? Are the Chinese fully integrated into our critical infrastructure?
Well, I wouldn't say integrated. I think that they have performed enough reconnaissance perhaps even had some oopsie moments. I think they are trying out some of their new military tactics on the Fifth Fleet out of Long Beach, Southern California area. I think they're looking to see where we have vulnerable areas, not only in the cyberspace but also in the physical space. Make no mistake, their intent for all countries that they have an economic investment in, and the U.S. is certainly no exception, is one of colonization ultimately. It's called the Chinese Dream, and a manifestation of that is to really map out what are the assets that they are going to attack, whether it's economic, whether it's cyber, whether it's kinetic, and then execute on those particular plans.
Wow. And have you seen this document or documents, or is it just something they talk about?
Well, both. They make no, well, here's the unique thing, Gary. Many of the military sites that I talk about in research, once I present them at a conference somewhere in the world, they are removed from the Chinese internet. It's a fact. What that means is I've cataloged much of the Chinese government's policies regarding cyber warfare, and now there are at least 9 new national laws dealing with cyber sovereignty.
Wow.
Space, yes, everything from preventing child porn to hoarding zero-day vulnerabilities for the Chinese government. And on the military side, I'm keeping a running log of the different types of strategic and tactical initiatives. And for 2021, two of their key themes are intimidation operations and intelligentization, including cyber, of their mechanism, which means gathering more and more information so that they have it cataloged. So if they put up a targeting list, they know exactly where they're going to go, when they're going to strike, what weapon system, and how successful, and what that damage assessment will be when they're done.
Wow. And to that end, this is pretty new news. This is purportedly some new nuclear silos that are being built in the desert in China. And if I'm not mistaken, there might be 2 different locations that these are happening. And you're smiling. Why? Did I get a scoop?
Possibly.
No, it's not. It's not a scoop.
So that location is one of the many strategic support force, the SSF locations for intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities. It's a launch test site in I won't use the term Gobi Desert because that's a large space. It really is in the rest of Xinjiang province out in Western China. That's where the rest of Muslim population exists. And there is a significant cyber containment going on there, meaning everything from experimental from a bioweapons perspective on the Muslim population through the use of applications to control information, also to report on one's neighbors. I mean, it's very heinous. The really unique thing is that the Chinese military is enforcing this at the brigade level. I mean, imagine if a brigade came to your town and said, you're now going to use this app and you can't go to the internet without our permission and review. That's what you have happening in Xinjiang.
So you mentioned something also that's very near and dear to our mission, which is biohacking. And the whole idea of healthcare. One of the things that we've done recently is we created a superhero comic called Defending Your Health. The purpose of that is to distill complicated technology information into something people can get their heads around. So we talk about defending personal health information, the security of digital medical devices, and things like that. You're a volunteer. I think you're a volunteer for the biohacking village at DEF CON, right? Are you volunteering, or is that?
Well, yes, sir. For the past 3 years, I've been the volunteer wrangler. So I go out and recruit them. And this year, every year we've had a surplus. So we do a good job in recruitment. We're sending some to the ICS village this year to help them out with volunteer efforts. So I'm the guy in charge of that. And then I've designed 2 tabletop exercises, one on medical device manufacturers and healthcare delivery organizations.
Really?
Yes, sir. And you're welcome to sign up for it if you go to the biohacking webpage.
I already did. I signed up before the show. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. So don't be angry at me when we get in. And then the other,
but the only problem is I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I if I don't want to bring down the collective, whoever's working on my table.
Well, so you'll just wait until you see the way that I conduct these. It's a level set, so there are no egos in the room, and the only one that should be embarrassed is me. It's meant to be a positive learning experience, so no one should be harmed, and it will be an opportunity for everybody to participate and learn something.
So maybe now take advantage of this opportunity and tell our audience how to sign up for that.
Yes, sir. So if you go to it's BioISAC. I can't remember the URL. I've got it up, but if you Google BioISAC DEF CON 2021, you'll see our page. And if you go to the CTF page, and I think Nina put up actually a TTX link now, so you can go there and sign. So you can sign up for either the HISAC, the Health ISAC, Information Sharing Analysis Center, and Biohacking Village, which is about healthcare delivery organizations and medical device manufacturers, or you can sign up for the biopharma and the BioISAC, which is more about bioweapons, bioeconomy, bio-national security. So that's on the strategic side. So you got your tactical choice on the left.
Wow.
And on the right hand, you get strategic bioweapons. Absolutely.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. I mean, this is so important and so good and so needed and so timely, given with, COVID and nation states trying to steal our intellectual property and things like that. Maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about that. How are we doing? Are we, is our pharmaceutical industry cyber secure?
Well, I think, it's interesting they should ask that question. The pharmaceutical companies do have very good staff from an information security perspective. They have cyber threat intelligence operators that are the best in the world. They are protecting their enterprise from those individuals. And certainly from an insider threat, they're tracking that as well. The dilemma is that some of these hackers, the military and the state security apparatus of China, are so good and can be so persistent on a network that they can be there, as the Verizon data breach report indicates, in excess of 175 days without being noticed. And why they are so successful is they are using Mandarin Chinese to hack and be persistent. And if you don't understand the semantics and the colloquialisms of Mandarin, or some of the cultural nuances of what they may be saying, or some of the passphrases, you're never going to notice them. That's why they are so successful.
Well, that's what I think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, so what is the not a solution? What can we do different, better? Agile. I mean, what do we do next? As a country.
Wow. Strategically, I think it's important to do exactly what President Biden is doing, which is putting them on notice. I think what has transpired, in the previous administration was one of kind of wrapping them on the head without any sort of resolution, sort of bringing them the problem and letting them figure it out. I think working with this adversary is probably the key. Certainly military exchanges will continue to go on, because militaries don't want to fight a war. God knows I don't want to go back. Hopefully. Right. But I think, it's working with them. And that does not one of being their friend, but letting them know that we are a competent, willing adversary. They honestly do not view the United States as a superpower anymore. They are claiming that title themselves, and we are at a disadvantage because we have run the rails politically and economically. They see us as a failure.
That's an important insight. I mean, that China itself doesn't think of the United States, as a superpower anymore. Is that coming just, from the president, or is that like a cultural sort of sense, that like China's number one kind of a thing?
Well, it is. And certainly the China dream, as I mentioned before, and what they call their Project 2025 on the IT side, the previous President Hu Jintao, and the current president for life, President Xi Jinping, have mandated that all systems be cyber secure, including the military, which will have full applications of information technology, including the cyber capabilities. What that means is they see that they must ensure that Chinese dream continues without any sort of undue pressure or lack of success. As you know, Gary, regime change in China only comes when the current leadership is questioned by the population. Thus the information control, thus the Great Firewall of China, thus a variety of laws that are meant to really contain the discordant activity of Chinese citizens vis-a-vis peace activists in Hong Kong, for example, in the Umbrella campaign. They really have to work hard to make sure that nobody is dissatisfied, that the pure culture of China remains empirically positive and number one to them.
Well, to build on that point, though, and the amazing thing about the opportunity to listen and learn from you is all this is live. I mean, this is happening right now, and so pertaining to Hong Kong, for example, what do you think is going to happen next?
What I think is going to happen next. I mean, so much has happened in the past that needs to be certainly noted. They have replaced the leadership with, Beijing installed autocrats. They have removed curriculum from some of the textbooks so that the children are now being taught the Mandarin version of Hong Kong Chinese history. It should be noted for historical purposes that whoever the British sailor or soldier was that signed that 100-year lease failed. They should have made it 1,000 or 1,000,000 years, because the Chinese will never forget the fact that part of China was owned by England. That's why England bears the brunt of a lot of the colonization efforts that you see going on with regard to the One Belt, One Road initiative.
I mean, if you go back for a moment, so you're obviously a student of history. When did things kind of change between the United States and China? I remember there was a period where people were cooperating and looking for cultural exchange and things like that. When did that start not going in a great direction?
Well, I think, the United States has been a longtime ally of mainland China and Taiwan. I mean, you can go back to the rape of Nanjing in 1939, pre-World War II and the Japanese invasion. We supported, Chinese guerrillas fighting off the Japanese soldiers. I mean, you look at World War II, General Chennault was present with his flying tigers, flying missions to disrupt the Japanese supply chains out of Burma. So, I mean, there's a good history there. I mean, granted, the period from 1949 when Mao Zedong kicked General Chiang Kai-shek off to Taiwan and communist China was born in its present version, it has been cumbersome. A lot of that was due to the fact that the Russians were influencing the political parties of China. That has since abated. The Chinese hate the Russians. They hate the Japanese.
Really? Oh, wait. Let's stay there 1 second. I mean, that's an incredibly important statement. So, can you amplify, that for us? Because, just tell us what happened.
Well, certainly the Russians tried to make China, not realizing the cultural dilemma that they were facing of how rooted in history and ceremony that the Chinese were, and they were going to essentially make them a Soviet bloc nation state of their own by instilling communism. Well, it didn't work, because the Chinese were a little bit smarter than that and said, we like communism because the good supports the whole and the whole supports the individual, the Communist Manifesto, but we don't really want to learn how to speak Russian because we speak Mandarin, simplified or traditional based on Father Mao's teachings, and we don't really like your Russian. I'll tell you a story, Gary. When I was there in 83, a fellow student and I look kind of like I do now, maybe I'm not going to ever age, but they saw us come around the corner and they said, "Oh, look at this. The Russians are back." And they said, we said clearly, "No, we are not Russians. We are foreigners. We are Americans here studying." They're like, "Oh, good, because we didn't like them when they were here before."
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's real.
Wow, that's interesting too. And to broaden the aperture of our discussion a little bit here, you were born in Iran. And
no, not born there. I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. I grew up in Iran. Yeah.
Oh, forgive me.
No, that's all right.
Did you? So the language there, I guess, is Farsi.
Farsi.
And did you learn Farsi?
No, I mean, I was not smart enough. I'm not smart enough now to have picked it up. So no, I did not.
So, my goodness, I mean, talking about Iran, I mean, you're like a triple threat, or triple good guy. I'm going to not call it that, but my goodness, you know so much about China, so much about Iran, and so much about Russia. How do you sleep at night?
Well, I mean, I sleep soundly because I get at 2:30 to go work out, but that's my problem. I mean, I've been approached by folks at international conferences, telling me to watch out what I say. In 2011, 2012, I was actually assaulted in Amsterdam. Yep.
Whoa.
Spent the night in a Dutch hospital. So yeah, the threat is real. I mean, it definitely is. So I'm a little bit more careful when I traveled internationally. Yeah.
Well, I'm not someone they'd be interested in because I wear a superhero costume. So no one's gonna, mess with me. Actually, I take that back. I can't believe I'm saying this on air. So wow, Bill, I mean, I could just listen and learn from you forever. So is there anything you'd like to just kind of amplify as we're wrapping up here?
I think the amplification should come from the fact that if I were in government and if I were in charge for a day, I would ask my intelligence agencies, I would ask my military, I would ask my economic leaders, those that have cells that are interested in studying China, to really get on their best game. Because right now it feels like they're planning for their next position and not really keeping their eye on the ball. They're in a different conversation, and the Chinese are going to be there regardless. They know that we turn over every 3 to 4 years, and they're taking advantage of that. So I would say find those experts that are favorable and patriots to our country and allow them to be the advisors. They're the ones that are consistent. They're the ones that know this country, and utilize them to the largest extent possible. Otherwise, it's going to be rinse, repeat, and get hacked all day long until you and I are no longer here.
Wow. Well, on that sober assessment, on behalf of a grateful nation, thanks so much for who you are and how you have served our country, and keep it up. We need, patriots and people like you. The world does, actually. Maybe there's even a way to somehow bring people together, so let me ask you about that. How do we bring people together as opposed to these kind of adversarial relationships that we seem to have with at least the 3 countries that you're involved with?
Well, I think it really is looking at the culture and the people independently. I've been to the Beltway, and I've seen my peers who are China experts that advise our government, and they are so dour and negative on China. And then I ask them, I'm like, have you ever been there? And they're like, no, but we've read about it. And it's like, wow.
Okay.
You must be good at orating, because nobody else is listening to anybody else other than the negative. People want a war, Gary. They need a war. They want something to feel good about winning. I would say if we win the cultural war, if we win the economic war, if we win who we are as Americans and be true to ourselves and not castigate and perhaps demonize these other countries, I think we'll be stronger for it.
Well, on that upbeat note, again, on behalf of a Grateful Digital Universe, Bill, thanks so much for spending your time with us. How do people get in touch with you?
Yes, sir. So it's very easy. It's my last name, Hagestad. I'll spell it phonetically. Hotel Alpha Golf Echo Sierra Tango Alpha Delta at reddragon1949.com. That'll come directly to me, or you can use admin at reddragon1949.com. I have a LinkedIn profile. It has all of my pictures and a lot of the files that I've worked on, certainly out there. And I'm on Twitter also. So plenty of ways to get a hold of me, definitely. Or come to DEF CON.
Yeah. Virtually or in person, yes. Are you going to be at DEF CON?
No, sir. No, no.
Yeah, I understand. Well, again, thank you so much for for who you are and what you're doing and why you do it, and for our audience, thanks to you for what you do. You met another real life unsung cyber hero who toils in anonymity to keep us safe, and we're very lucky to have all of you in our world. So thanks, and stay safe out there.